safety is achieved through preparation and precaution, not by the skill of the archer. So in the course of the past few days, as most of you have probably been following, we've been having a lot of discussions about safety in archery. And I guess this is the third video in an unplanned trilogy on safety, but here we are. So in previous videos and discussions, and I'm following some of the forum threads and Facebook posts and social media events, and a lot of people, or some people, have been raising other examples of supposed safety breaches. And they've been sharing certain videos of well-known figures. So I thought, well, okay, let's actually take a look at these. This isn't meant to be a defense of these people. This is simply my take, or my evaluation and assessment of what's happening. Now, before we do anything about watching videos about people doing different kinds of archery, we should really establish a benchmark as to what we refer to by safety. The scenario in which safety is most important is range safety. That's shooting ranges, archery clubs. In these environments, safety is paramount. There is zero tolerance. This is because that there are many people, some people who are regulars, some who are new, could be organized chaos, and you need strict rules and people to enforce these rules to ensure nothing happens. Because in these environments, when you start getting complacent, things start to happen. You turn around for a moment and someone's walked past the shooting line and someone has to call a ceasefire. And the same applies to shooting ranges for guns, more so for guns. There are very strict rules. And ranges aren't just the formal club environments where 100 people stand on one line and shoot together. It can also refer to field environments, so field archery ranges or 3D archery ranges. These environments also must follow strict rules to ensure that, since people are moving around the course, that it's very clear that you have to ensure that the range is clear, that you're following a set order, that you don't go off the beaten path, so that way nothing happens. And again, we have this big guarantee for safety in archery in order for archery clubs everywhere to function. Now, some people have taken issue with range safety rules, not because the rules don't apply to them, but because they don't want to be around a stuck-up, snobby environment where you can't wear camouflage, and you can't do this, and you can't do that. And fair enough, rules aren't for everyone. Some people just want to go to the woods and shoot, and that's completely fine. But the misconception, or the straw man that's been put forward is, oh, these club shooters, they wouldn't know what to do in the wild, they would be too afraid to shoot. No, it's not like that. Range rules don't apply everywhere. And if we're not shooting on the range, we don't have to follow range rules. That's a fairly obvious point, but some people want to inflate our safety ego by thinking we bubble wrap everything. We only bubble wrap things on the range because not only do we have to guarantee safety for all participants, we also have to give the impression to the public and to lawmakers that we are doing everything possible to mitigate every possible risk, as we've covered in previous videos, because it's the perception of safety which is very important. When people think of archery, they think of a dangerous shooting sport, despite the fact that nobody's been hurt or killed by archery in the last 100 years. So it's the perception which matters. So our rules on the range are far in excess of what we actually need. Things that go wrong don't go that wrong, so it's not as bad. But again, because we're in an organized, chaotic environment, we have to be super careful as to ensure that every possible thing will have a very, very, very large margin for error. So that way, nothing could happen. As we said before, if you're off the range, then obviously these things don't necessarily apply to you. Now, some people, of course, will use common sense safety. That's what the driving force of safety is. Most of it is common sense. If someone's standing in front of you, don't shoot at them. That sort of thing. It doesn't mean that if you're standing, half a meter in front of me, I can't shoot. No, of course, in the field, if you're like to my side and you're slightly in front of me, I can shoot. I'm not gonna like swing around and shoot you. But of course, that's a judgment call. So it is okay to not follow 100% range safety rules. And this is also a reminder to club shooters that when you talk to people who don't shoot in the club environment, they will also consider that our safety rules are quite excessive and don't necessarily apply outside. Common sense safety is typically sufficient when we're doing things like hunting or stumping or anywhere else in the field. So let's not have this issue where we have to apply this one set of strict rules everywhere we go. In other settings, it's actually okay as long as you're not doing something overtly and obviously stupid. You're not going to shoot someone accidentally. And that leads us to our analysis. So we're going to go through several videos talking through some of the cases which have been brought up in this discussion about safety, and I'm going to give my point of view and my evaluation on what's happening in these scenes. Now, the first thing we'll be seeing here is Lajos Kassai. And of course, he's the most well-known Hungarian horse archer who basically created the modern form of horse archery in his style. And this is the Guinness World Record attempt where he shoots 12 consecutive targets from horseback. And this has been raised by some people where say, where's your double standard? Like, if one stunt shooter can't do shooting towards people, why's he allowed to shoot towards people and no one seems to care? So that's the show. It's very short, that's it, and this is the world record attempt, the 4th Guinness World Record. So in watching this, I'm going to mute it now. In watching this, what is the biggest risk that you think is present in this scene? I'll give you a moment to think about this. What is the biggest risk? And the biggest risk in all this is falling off the horse. You might think, well, hang on a moment, this is a guy shooting arrows at people, isn't that the risk? No, because there's been no incidents of an assistant being hit by an arrow from a demonstration using horse archery, typically because there normally aren't people in front of the archer, but there's never been a case where someone's been shot. On the other hand, riding a horse requires a lot of focus, concentration, and skill, especially when you're not using your hands. And there have been incidents of horses throwing the riders off. The International Horse Archery Association runs a world championship every year. I believe it was this year, or a very recent event which is live streamed, where such a rider was thrown off during the course. And because these riders aren't familiar with the horses they're being given for the competition, this is not that unlikely. So it's more likely that someone will fall off a horse than to be shot by an arrow. And that's actually factually proven through analysis of past events. Now, of course, you might still be wondering, but what about the assistants? They're literally in front of Kassai as he rides past. So this is my take on the safety and risk management of this particular demonstration. Now, one thing is, of course, the context. We have to be very aware of the context. As I said before, we made a distinction between range safety and other parts of the spectrum where it is okay to take certain liberties as long as the risk is manageable and reasonable. Now, first and foremost, this is a Guinness sanctioned event. It's in a major stadium, or at least a stadium in Hungary. So it's sanctioned, it is observed, there are plenty of experts and safety safeguards and multiple redundancies so that this event can run. This is a spectator event. There are thousands of people watching this event. So if it wasn't safe, then someone in the process, whether it's Kassai himself, his team, the team from Guinness World Records, the stadium staff and crew, someone's going to say no. So it's been vetted by, I assume, numerous people. And Guinness World Records have come under fire in the past for basically encouraging people to push safety boundaries to beat records. And in recent times, they've basically removed records which encourage unnecessary risk-taking. A lot of records do require risk-taking, but the ones which are increasingly dangerous, Guinness no longer do. So that does count for something. Now, in terms of what else is happening here, which shows that this is actually quite safe, I don't think anybody here in the audience would have thought this is dangerous. So, firstly, all these assistants, without a doubt, would have been taught how to throw the targets. This is very similar to how in martial arts like Taekwondo or in karate or whatever martial art, you have all the board breaking stunts where people break boards and kick boards and do flying kicks and so on. The reason why that is similar is because you actually need to know how to hold the board. Otherwise, you might end up breaking your wrist, and in reality, there's a high risk of getting kicked in the face, and that actually does happen. So it's actually not that dissimilar. So all the people helping out have been taught how to throw it, because it is possible to not throw it correctly. That actually wasn't a very good throw there, for example, but I presume that Kassai would not take the shot if the throw was bad. And the reason why there is a difference between a good throw and a bad throw is look at how far the assistants throw. And this is a very good angle to see. Angle and perspective can be quite misleading. And from this angle, it looks like he's shooting at his head. He's actually not. Look at the distance thrown. Now that is thrown perhaps around 2 meters away from the assistant. The assistant typically steps backwards. And, should be worth noting, the discipline used by Kassai. He does not raise the bow and point it at the assistant. And we can only really see this in the slower speed, because he's such a fast shooter. Even on horseback, we don't really appreciate this. So as he rides past, we don't see from this angle. That's a pretty clear safety thing. Like, just because he's in front of the shooter doesn't mean it's dangerous. In a range environment, this is an absolute no. But this is not a range environment. And in fact, this is quite a reasonable, if not safer, training demonstration than what he normally does. So this is the angle I want to look at. So as he rides past, he loads the arrow here. His bow is not presented and pointed at the assistant. As he rides past, the assistant throws, it's 2 meters away, he's on target, and that's an excellent shot. Of course, it's Kassai. What a shot that is, right in the middle there. Look at this angle, look at this spacing. Even in FITA guidelines, there are guidelines on what a field range looks like. And actually, I want to point this out because some clubs have to shoot using a staggered shooting line. That means the targets are set in one spot, and the shooting line is staggered for extra distance. And we need to have a minimum clearance of around 45 degrees from the shooter. So a person who is shooting at closer distance can be in front of my position as long as he or she is not in that 45 degree cone. It's actually 45 degree either way, so it's a 90 degree cone basically. As long as nobody's in that cone, then I'm safe to shoot. And again, this is the excess margin. If something goes horribly wrong, like I pluck the arrow and then the fletcher comes off and a gust of wind blows, an arrow won't go more than 45 degrees from our position. More likely, it might be like 5 degrees off target at most. At most. Now, if we apply that standard to Kassai over here, he actually exceeds that, because by the time he loses the arrow, the assistant is well outside of that 45 degree. I mean, maybe like the angle plays around here, but he's well outside the realm of any possible mishap. This is actually a huge testament to the discipline and training which Kassai enforces in his style and his school. He teaches this sort of thing. A novice archer, a daredevil, a risky, untrained archer may find themselves inevitably having the bow raised throughout the entire process. But Kassai does not. He does not point the bow at the assistant for that exact reason. He only brings the bow up when he addresses the target. And this is the same fundamental every archer faces. Look at this. This is such a huge clearance. that you cannot accidentally shoot this person in the head or anywhere else, because Kassai is focused only on target, which is nearly 2 to 3 meters away from the thrower. So that is a testament to the arrangement of the field. And as we come around to this angle, we'll see something else too. The distance being shot is very close. This is around 5 meters. And if you watch any of Kassai's training videos and features, this is his normal distance when training in school. It's 5 meters. 5 meters is a very short distance. And remember that at our target clubs, we normally start beginners at 10 meters. So this is actually not a very difficult shot. It's a high skill shot because it's a small moving target and it's doing this in one motion, in one circuit. So it's a difficult shot, but it's not a high risk shot because he's not shooting at the person. The target is thrown way in front, and the clearance is in fact greater than some of the things we see at a target range. So that in itself, this is why people probably don't see this as a risk. And in fact, there are more things to touch on too. In terms of like, what about the people who are standing on the other side of the circuit? Well, they're actually too far away to be shot because Kassai is shooting downwards. This is a sand pit, or the ground is very has soil or sand. Basically, he's shooting downwards, and he's shooting at very close targets. And if he does miss, the arrows are simply going to hit the ground. If they don't stay there, it will skip quite harmlessly. Should note that every assistant has eyes on Kassai. They're not being blindfolded, not looking away, even though they are meant to be looking forward to throw the disc. They are waiting for his approach. So every assistant is doing a safety. So every person in the background is watching. Every thrower is watching the approach. We have every single person on this line watching it. You see in the back over here, these assistants who are supposedly in danger are watching him. They're seeing him, so should something go wrong, there's plenty of time to react and get out of the way. If like the impossible happens. I'm not saying the impossible is an exaggeration, he is shooting downwards. So if you go across the other angle, you'll see that the angle of the shot, this is probably the best one, coming around this corner. You can see how we engage. That's the throw, that's the shot. He's actually shooting downwards, okay? It might skip off the ground, but that's a pretty low risk shot. So, all things considered, this is actually a very safe demonstration. And most importantly, this isn't meant to be a viral stunt video. This isn't stunt shooting. This is just horse archery. And this can be done in a much riskier way. In fact, one of the things which is quite tame about this is the fact that Lajos is not riding at full speed. I mean, this is the full video speed. This is a fairly gentle gallop. This isn't top speed. If you look at how horse archery is normally done by experienced shooters, let's go to the Swedish Grand Prix from 2014. This is a good example of a very fun video. These guys ride at full speed, and the courses range much differently. Alright, so this is awesome. But if you want to like see really cool archery, look at competitive horse archery. It's such a cool thing to watch. Holy crap, that was awesome. Wow, that was sick. Anyway, this is what I mean. These guys are galloping. They're much faster, and the targets are spaced further apart. Of course, there's no assistance in the way. They're shooting at stationary targets, but the circuit is set up to be done at speed. So Lajos is not doing horse archery at speed. He's doing this at a fairly relaxed pace. So this is the normal pace. We're shooting a target on top, shooting a target on the bottom. Very cool. Very, very cool. This is more dynamic. But the demonstration which Lajos does is quite conservative. And he gets the record, which is cool. And as we said before, there's no unnecessary risk. All these things seem to be quite reasonable and within acceptable risk. Does it violate range safety? Yes, but this isn't a target range. Is he ignoring common sense safety? No, in fact, he's got probably more safeguards in place than even we've identified in this video. The thing here is that safety is achieved through preparation and precaution, not by the skill of the archer. If Lajos was less skilled or somebody else did this demonstration, it wouldn't be less safe. It'll look embarrassing, but it wouldn't be unsafe because the safeguards are there. Now this doesn't mean that any novice can attempt this, because I'm sure Kassai would not allow this to be done by any of his students without demonstrating the proper skill. But this is not a high-risk stunt demonstration. It is a very low-risk demonstration. And I think that through looking at this more carefully, that I don't think anyone in the audience and any of us should think that this is dangerous. I mean, again, he's not riding at full speed. It's something that he has done safely in practice and demonstrated objectively many times before. And the targets are not being held by the assistant. So it's not a high-risk shot, which might be shooting at the assistant. Which is kind of funny, because if you watch other demonstrations, he actually does. And this is kind of weird and funny at the same time, but this is literally he's shooting at people. That's cool and weird, but at the same time, that hardly looks unsafe. Personally, that's a hell of a grouping. Holy crap, Lajos is awesome. Riding on horseback, shooting at a target, that is one hell of a grouping. But yeah, he is kind of breaking that universal rule of not pointing your weapon at somebody. But Lajos is not an exhibition shooter. He actually practices a style which he invented, but is based on Hungarian military archery. So it makes sense that this form of martial archery would have some sort of demonstration like this. And again, firstly, this isn't meant to be a stunt video. This is a training exercise, not unlike many of the exercises which people learn in sword fighting or martial arts. This would seem like the closest thing to live fire exercises. And the assistant is very well protected. Now, is there a risk? Yes. But let's pay attention to some of the safeguards in place. Firstly, again, it's not done at speed. It's a fairly gentle pace for the horse. Distance seems to be the standard 5-meter spacing. So this is what they've practiced lots of times. And at 5 meters, this is like a 1 meter wide foam shield. From the angle that he's shooting at, you can't see the assistant. The assistant is very well protected, and they've been taught to hold the shield properly so that nothing is exposed. So should the shooter miss, we'll try and slow it down even more. So should Lajos or any of the archers miss, they're not going to hit the person because there's nothing of the person sticking out from the target. Now you might say, but what about the legs? Sure, the legs might be a problem, and that's why this is somewhat risky. But at 5 meters, at this target at 5 meters is huge. This is absolutely a huge target at 5 meters, and it's very unusual for arrow, even a broken arrow or broken fletch, to go low at 5 meters. People normally shoot over, not under. That cow might be in danger, for example, not this particular assistant. There is a risk, and if you wanted to add extra safeguards, you might have like shin pads or something. But I believe this is at Kassai's school. It's not meant to be a public demonstration. It's not like the world records where the safeguards are even more redundant. This seems to be a routine training exercise by Kassai. So it's not showing off. This is a confidence demonstration that he is able to do this. And I imagine that again, a novice rider wouldn't be allowed to do this. But even if they did, the safeguards in place wouldn't be a huge issue. And you can see from this view, it's quite well designed. Sorry, you can see that the target is a very thick layer of, I believe it's foam or something similar, which we use in our normal targets. But it is backed by at least 1, if not 2 layers of some kind of wood panel. So it's a fairly or very safe thing. So arrows won't go through. They barely penetrate. I would imagine that as part of maintenance, that the shields are checked and replace when necessary. Not exactly sure what it is. It might be the foam shield that been cut out, but it looks like it's something else. It's really hard to tell from this angle. But the shield seems very safe. So the main risk there is simply you might get hit in the legs, but given that the way the demonstration is done, the distance is shot at, it's so unlikely that this is probably safer than many situations we find in a field course. And again, the biggest risk is simply the horse throwing the rider off, because the rider has numerous arrows in the hand, pointy objects, personal injury to the horse. The horse and rider is a bigger risk than the assistant. The assistant's probably glad he's not riding the horse, because doing horse archery on a galloping horse, it requires a lot of skill and things can go wrong. But being shot by the rider, probably less likely and less dangerous than what might happen from the horse. And on a similar note, a few people have shared this video saying, oh, there are audience members and other participants and things in this particular course. And if you watch the course, this is the Yabusame festival in Japan, Japanese horse archery. And the archers, you can see like between each target there are audience, there are people with cameras, and again, to a Western audience it might seem to be excessively dangerous, but all the targets are properly cleared. You can see this is the last target. They shoot 3 in a row, and the targets, I mean, this is an urban area for crying out loud. There are apartments in the background. What could go wrong? But this is an archer who's highly trained, riding at speed, shooting 3 in a row. But you can see that the last target is an example of everything between. The target has proper backstops, and the arrows are blunt, I believe. They have special tips that can hit the target, but they're not sharp war arrows. So this setup is perhaps more than sufficient, and all the people between, again, the camera angle perspective, really make things tricky to put into perspective. But there's plenty of space in between each target so that nobody's actually in the way of the shot. And if we are in a Western environment where we are super safety conscious, bubble wrapped and bureaucracy, then they wouldn't do this. They would just have people on one side for the audience. So that's our Western standards. But in the East, you have the archers in Mongolia or Bhutan literally standing next to the target itself. So even this is pretty mild compared to what you see elsewhere. But that is a very reasonable safety margin. And that's another thing that we need to consider. The margin for error is extremely wide, excessively wide. So should something go wrong, there's still no risk to the bystanders, to the audience. See, these people here, they can stay here. He's not shooting at them. He's shooting at this thing over here. And that's an incredible skill, by the way. Amazing to watch these traditional horse archers. But while it is a very fast-paced, intense activity, nobody here is in direct risk. And again, the main risk is to the rider, because they are riding at speed with no hands, so they need full control of the horse. So that's where it comes down. It's actually not the activity, and it isn't based on the skill of the archer, but the arrangement of this particular field and course is within acceptable risk for everybody. And again, I don't think any of these people will think that these people are in danger. And last but not least is the legend himself, Howard Hill. This is the segment from the short film A Cavalcade of Archery, where he does all these stunts, and this includes shooting at objects near people and shooting apples, prunes, not the cherry, off people's heads. And people have said, well, if you're gonna flip out over a modern day William Tell, what about Howard Hill? Howard Hill himself was a legend. He was probably the best trick shooter of his time. And while you might be fooled by the camera angles, all his shots are authentic. And he can probably do harder than this. Now, people said, well, where was the outcry when this happened? Why aren't people complaining about Howard Hill? Why do people respect him? Firstly, there's a lot we don't actually know about the scene. This is a professional film made by, I think it was Warner Brothers, and what people suspect is that under this very silly wig, there's a steel helmet or skull cap or something. So there is a safeguard. Now, I don't know 100% for sure, but it would seem foolish, even for Howard Hill, to attempt a shot with this possibly fatal consequence. He does really crazy stunts in his films, but this particular shot, it would be hard to imagine there's no safeguard. So people suspect that there is some kind of skull cap or helmet underneath the wig. Now, of course, this is a crazy shot. This is the William Tell shot done authentically without any camera tricks or angles here. We can see the distance, we can see the difficulty. Why are people okay with this? People aren't. In the course of this discussion, we've made the assumption that we're okay with Howard Hill because he's a legend. Not everyone respects him in that regard. A lot of people look up to him, but not everyone does. And remember, Howard Hill made this video in the 1950s. The 1950s were a very different time. This was a period where risk-taking was widely encouraged and seen as a good thing. And in his time, there were very, very few highly skilled archers. Archery was rare, it was exotic, but this is again the 1950s. This sort of thing would not be done today. The attitudes are different. The film industry has more regulation and standards. We didn't see tragedies happen on stage due to the mishandling of firearms. Guns especially changed the way we did films, and even in the early days, the development of blank firing guns was still in its infancy. And we still have tragedies like Brandon Lee in The Crow, who was shot with a supposedly safe gun, which was actually squib-loaded, and killed him in filming. So today we have CGI, which replaces the need to do dangerous stunt shots or think of fancy ways to make archery look cool, because CGI replaces everything. And a lot of people don't like CGI because it's all fake, and that's a fair opinion. But like I said, Howard Hill wouldn't exist as a trick shooter in the same sense today. Why didn't people cry out? Because in the 1950s, this was cool. Today, it isn't. Secondly, YouTube wasn't around back then. It wasn't a viral video. It was a commercial short film. Thirdly, he's dead. So the legend can't speak for himself. And he died nearly 40 years ago. So we're comparing people from the past, from a different time period, where the standards and safety protocols were not in place because they didn't need to be in place back then. There are other videos of stunt shooters from the 1930s, for example. It's the 1930s. This isn't the same as today. Today we've gone from that. We've gone past the risk-taking, daredevil mentality, and some people still do this. That's okay. But in archery, it's proven it can be done. It's no longer a spectacle. It's no longer a wow factor. And saying that Howard Hill can do this, if we all can, we've ignored like 60 years of development in archery and in filmmaking and stunts. So would this be okay today? People would generally say no. And the reason why Howard Hill is spoken of with such reverence and nostalgia is because he came from a period where these things were acceptable, and now they're not. In conclusion, we still need to respect the safety of archery. There isn't just one standard of safety which everyone has to follow. If we're in a formal environment like a range or a club, then very clearly we need to follow safety procedures to the letter. Otherwise, things will go wrong, something will happen on our watch, and next thing we know, the club gets shut down. Outside the club environment, there's more freedom and flexibility in how you interpret rules and safety. You don't have to be a strict range master if you're not on the range. Common sense normally is the main mode of safety. The demonstrations you've seen contain multiple safeguards and multiple redundancies so that things don't go terribly wrong. And especially in noting that the margin for error is very forgiving. So should things go wrong, then it won't be catastrophic. And most importantly, the safety of the demonstration is not dependent on how good the archer is. If an unskilled or lesser skilled archer attempted the same demonstrations, this is the horseback archery especially, not the Howard Hill shots, those were exceptional for that time. But if someone did a demonstration today, then the setup of the demonstration should be safe enough that even an unskilled archer won't cause disaster if they screw it up. Safety isn't just about consent between all the participants, but the assurance that every possible measure is in place where if things do go wrong, every person involved has the confidence to know that things will still be okay. And remember, I'm not saying don't take risks or avoid dynamic styles of archery. No, these are very, very exciting styles to watch, if not practice. And these are things, if I had the chance to do so, I would want to practice too. But don't take unnecessary risk. If you can do the same performance to demonstrate skill without putting people in danger, then that's just as impressive, if not more, because it's the skill that speaks, not the danger.